Good morning, Baba Wolfie. Here we are.
Good
Here we
morning.
are. How wonderful. You know, there are a lot of things that can take us to and fro in life, but I have to say, I had a little girl giddiness waking up this morning saying, I'm having my coffee with Baba Wolfie. And even though I'm not at his house or he's not at mine, we have this wonderful machine container where we almost can think we're having coffee this morning together.
We
Just
are
kidding.
definitely having conversation. That's for
Yes,
sure.
we are having good conversation. So to my friends who are just tuning in, what a treat, what a treat, what a treat. Baba Wolfie is an elder that you may not know yet. And the reason you wouldn't know him on the scale that you know Sangoma and as an elder in Erskills or in various camps is because the amazing event that Baba Wolfie was connected to for another wonderful elder friend of mine, Elspeth, didn't happen. And it didn't happen because of this pandemic. And when we began moving toward the summer solstice and said, well, you know, the young people out there in the protest streets doing their thing for us, and how can we help them? How can we and we've just been talking about it a little bit, whose eyes have seen some things, as the man on the television in the commercial says, we know some things because we've seen some things. And that's the tall and the short of it, Baba. And so you've done a lot of work with peacemaking, and you came to us through the south of our wheel, Earth Mama, and she said this about you, and I want to share this with the people that are watching. She said, well, you know, I got a feeling that you and Wolfie would have a great conversation, because you know, sometimes when people try to collaborate and come in together and be unified to do a really good thing, their human dynamics get all kind of in the way. And no matter where our dynamics were going in Grease Song, somehow Wolfie would come in and he would be able to section the different parts where we could rise to a greater love and appreciation for each other. And I thought, well, what a voice is that we need right now. So we talked about a couple of things, Baba, as we open, and I turn it over to you. I think it's important to say to our listeners that we may cover a myriad of conversations in this 30 to 40 minutes, but ultimately Baba's heart and my heart is concerned about how you find your truth, how you are in charge of that story that your life is writing right now. And you don't take any bad actors, as the news people are saying, or you don't give your narration over to other people, but we each wade through the very muddled lenses that keep coming at us every day. And I've talked to this Baba for a minute this morning. I'm convinced that if you listen, if you hang in here with us, he's going to give you some tools for a myriad of reasons. He's a PhD. He's looked at things from a different number. He's a war vet. And he's almost 8 decades old. I'm over 6 decades old. So, you know, check it out. I think there's some insight and some wisdoms to be given. So, Baba, what do you say is the greatest tool that we as the elders can offer to this younger generation in terms of being able to discern what their truth is and what it's not at any given moment?
That's Sangoma. That's you're very generous in describing things. You know, the fact that I'm a what they call moss-back turtle. You know, a turtle's been around a long time, has moss growing on its shell. So I guess you could say that's part of it. But I'm a psychologist by training, and I use that techniques when I think about things. And in latter years, meaning like the last 15 or 20 years, I've focused more and more on the journey within, because all journeys begin with the journey within, and all change begins with the journey within. And I think that this is a critical when we look at the complexities that we're confronted with today, pandemic, racial injustice, economic injustice, massive kinds of problems. And we could disentangle the threads of how this evolved over time. The other thing is in an age of distraction and intense impatience, people tend not to understand that it takes time to change a huge country of over 300 million people. When the celebration of avarice and greed, unparalleled avarice and greed, have been celebrated ever since, it really got going with Ronald Reagan. The sowing of the seeds of distrust in our institutions, the current divisive, negativistic, narcissistic leadership, which is John Chancellor, a well-respected reporter of several decades ago, said that we have a crisis in leadership. I think that when you begin to take a look at all these historical facts, if you were a young person, and to me that's anybody under 60, it's discouraging. And you begin to believe that things don't work, that institutions don't function, that government actually is the enemy, and those are just simply not true. In my travels here and about, I have taken and had long conversations with people from other countries, Egypt, Indonesia, Mexico, etc., Ireland, England, Germany. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to travel quite a bit. And you come home and you can see, because you have access to other sources other than corporate controlled media, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just you have to pick and choose about what. But what you find and what you come to believe, at least in my perspective, is that representative democracy is absolutely the worst form of possible government until you look at everything else. It's like sausage. You like the product, but you don't really want to watch it being made. And so from the perspective of multiple decades, looking back, the knowledge and awareness is like a spiral. And what we offer, and I promise that those that are younger also, is you revisit old issues, but you do it from a new perspective. And that's the perspective of continual growth and evolving. When you look back and revisit old traumas, old beliefs, old understandings, old learnings, it has a different perspective. Old guilts, old mistakes, you look at it from a different point of view. And so the perspective changes. I call it the developmental point of view, that each of us goes through certain developmental stages as part of our journey within. I mean, certainly yourself and mine and our watchers, our listeners, have a different perspective at 30 than they had at 10, at 40, and they had at 20. And there are certain developmental challenges that each of us have had to meet as we go along, establishing our own independence as we broke away during the 20s, establishing ourselves and our careers and our families at 30s, in the 30s and the 40s, and the great reassessment of who we are and what we're about and where we're heading in the 40s into the 50s, etc. So when we look at the challenges of each of those things, like for instance, like everything broke in the 40s. You know, I needed glasses and my teeth got bad and I had a kidney stone. I mean, everybody has these challenges and what have you. So developmentally, on the journey within your story, and there's only one story, and that's your story. And when you want to go answer those fundamental questions that we're all here for, who am I? What am I doing here? And where am I going? And where I am going. Of course, I can jumpstart a lot of this and say that a psychiatrist that I was very much enamored with during my college years, and I still pull out certain pieces, said, you're here to find your gifts, develop them, and give them back. And from that developmental perspective, over time, the teens, the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, and beyond, this is the time of having developed those gifts, become reassured with those gifts, understanding those gifts. Now it's time to give them back. And so from the perspective of multiple decades, I think that's what we have to offer. I think that reassurance, the urging of patience, of continuing to work, don't give up, don't stop believing, especially in yourself. Now, having said those things, as a white man who has experienced white privilege, I took the trouble in kind of preparation for our conversation to look up white privilege, and there was 27 points. 27 points. I have a couple of friends, not many, at least not anymore, who completely denied white privilege as they lived it and breathed it, thought it, slept it every day of their damn life, and denied. And yet my experience, my education, I mean, my evolving understanding of racial relations and injustice over time, historically, since the inception of this country, since the very beginning, we've had, just slavery, just that word alone should send cold chills up anybody's back. When we're individuals, we have to look at people as individuals and not as people with blue eyes or people with blonde hair or different skin colors. We have to look at the individual and make our judgments, our discriminations, and not unhealthy, healthy discriminations. There's people I don't like. I mean, it's just the way it is. But I like to think there's more people I do like, and I like to think that you're just a friend I haven't met yet. That kind of approach, the more upbeat, positive. John F. Kennedy once said, cynical, negativistic people never accomplish anything. And then Bobby Kennedy, and you can tell you kind of era that I came up in, Bobby Kennedy said, I see things as they are. Some people see things as they are and ask why. I see things as they should be and ask why not. And ask why not. Why not economic equity, a level playing field where everybody has a shot? And by the way, this doesn't just deal just with skin color and that kind of bigotry. It deals also with women who, did a great job during the Great War, World War II, went to work and then went back home afterwards. But that was, for whatever reasons you might want to pursue. But as an elder, as a ritual sage, my entire generation, all my young life was about war. World War II, followed by the Korean War, after we dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Korea, and then the Cold War, where I actually served in the Air Force. And then on the very edge of that, as I was leaving because we got into Vietnam. You could see that large sucking noise as we got pulled in deeper and deeper, as if we didn't learn a damn thing from Dien Bien Phu and the French in 1954. So anyway, so from the perspective as you evolve and get older and you look back and revisit your timeline, your own personal timeline, go back to those embarrassing childhood incidents that happened during your teen years and really look at them. What you find out is, of course, that they weren't as bad as you thought they were. But those unconscious drivers of embarrassment and so forth, from those little incidents, we identify them, we increase our level of awareness. Now, I like to characterize awareness as a 360 degree circle. If we had achieved 360 degrees of awareness, you'd be calling me Buddha. And so we can't really hope for that. I mean, we can, but this Dale Bugle friend that I went to India with, and forgive me, Dale, if I reveal that you is what do they say? Swami Rama, who Himalayan Institute out of Holmesburg, Pennsylvania, one of his adepts, that would be the right, used to say that once in a great while, we get just a little tiny peak of the, and you can use all the words you want, the great wind, the god, goddess, she of 1,000 names. We once in a while we'll get a tiny little peak of that through the layers and layers of ignorance. So, and once you've seen that, then it's like a power drive to your engine of understanding and of willing to invest in one another, in our species, in our best energies, and so forth. That, like the pandemic, which we currently are experiencing and will be experiencing now for a number of years. And from what I'm reading through my, I like things like Scientific American, which always tends to give you advanced notices from a scientific perspective, from a factual basis perspective, not from some political spin machine or somebody's agenda, hypothesis formulation, reality testing, etc. Something that you can kind of count on. And then from The Economist, which isn't exactly what you call a liberal rag, because they deal with the numbers and with the facts. They tend to be a little on the conservative side. So they're not politically inflamed. They don't promote divisiveness, racial hatred, by touting the virtues of white supremacists, who are the most virulent, and the survivalists are the most anti-American, anti-democratic subgroups in the country today. But so by reading that diversity and by other sources outside the country, all the way from The Guardian to Al Jazeera, which you can find on YouTube, by the way, you get a contrasting set of ways of looking and perspective, where when you bring your experience in life and you've done your own work, you have a chance to actually see things in different ways. And from that comes catharsis. From that comes the awareness and negating of the more unconscious influences in your life that can sometimes drive people. There's nothing more disturbing to me than to run into somebody who will not self-reflect. Will not self-reflect. Because they will not self-reflect, they lack empathy, they lack understanding, and they behave in the old negative ways all too often. Now, I know people who have very good positive intentions, but they don't have a clue about why they've been married and divorced 3 times. And you ask them, they simply do not know. Well, we just didn't get along. No, that's not good enough. What is it about ourselves that interacted in such a way as to destroy that relationship? From the microcosm to the macrocosm, from the small to the large, that's what we can do. That's what we can do to affect change. We can alter energy systems by the way we interact with them. If someone else is angry, instead of being a bad cop and getting angry and aggravating the situation and pulling out your gun because you can and shooting somebody in the back because you can, instead you de-escalate. Say, whoa, wait a second. Yeah, and I'm alluding to what's been going on in this country. You bet I am. You're damn right I am. Instead of, you don't give a death sentence because you've been sleeping in your car. You don't give a death sentence because somebody gets in your face and yells at you. I'm sorry. That just isn't the way it works. That is not the way it works. And what we've come to reveal with the use of all the cameras now is what has always been in place. And that is an inequity in the administration of justice. And it's systematic. And systematic injustice has another name. It's called tyranny. And if there was one thing this country was built on, it was the resistance to tyranny of all kinds. And I'm just talking about, in this case, racial tyranny. But let's talk about economic tyranny. And when you refuse to give people a decent living wage, where you have to work 2 and 3 jobs. And by the way, this is more than racial. I mean, I have young friends who work 2, 3 jobs, can barely get their rent paid. They're living clearly paycheck to paycheck. This is just wrong. After the first $1 billion, what the hell else do you need another couple billion? This is the celebration of avarice and greed that we have seen in this country. And it is some, but not all, politicians, legislators, etc., that promote. So again, this is a very complex, intertwined, inner workings, all working, and probably is. But we're reaching the point now where there's so much data, you simply must pick and choose how much and you can take. And at what point do you know that you've had enough and you have to step down and step back, take a step back from all of it, a breather, so to speak, before you re-engage? But, I have friends who say, well, I don't ever deal with politics. I got news for you folks. Everything's politics. So you better figure out how to cope with that. And but all this comes, and I promise you it will come with time and experience, and then taking the time to push the pause button and looking back at earlier decades of your life, and then taking those, what I call thought triggers from the various things that have happened to you, developing them, and then working with it. And ultimately, this journey within always results in journey without. That you begin to interact with people. And an interesting thing happens. We begin to pull people to us who share like minds, like thought forms. We may have variance, but we grow a culture of understanding, of interpretation, and of action. And we are in this together. We're one species on this tiny little blue marble in the midst of god-awful foreverness. I can't even conceive of infinity. My finite mind is just not that good. So I think I kind of went on there a little bit.
You did, but Baba is so good because, and it's so good that you were my first interview because, I'm a student. Lots of people consider me a teacher, but at my best, I'm a student. And because we wanted to have a little juicy bit right in an interview like this, a couple of things I learned. Myself and our viewers have the fine thing of being able to hit the rewind button and take you back to the beginning and get a pencil and paper and take out those nuggets. No, it's true, and I'll point them out to you because in the initial question that we were asking, how do we develop the tools that we need to find our truth through the dialogue that you've just laid out there for us, I caught, where did we first lose our trust? And you mentioned those embarrassing moments at teens where, like, we tried something and it didn't work out well. All of us can remember that, no matter what it was, no matter whether it was a personal, a crush, sweetheart thing, or a social thing in school. It doesn't matter what it was. When you said it, I felt it. I was like, wow, that's so true. And then the growing pains out of that make you wonder about what you trust about yourself.
Yes.
You see, and what you go, oh, I never thought I'd do or say something like that. And so then you have that reflection, which led you deeper. I'm gonna listen to you a couple of times, deeper into the people now, which is a question I asked you earlier that really terrify us. And you described them as the people without self-reflection, the people who never look in as to what so they can own what they contributed to the problem. All of these things are so key to what makes us trip and fall over our truth. And so it's not that I have anything to add other than, yes, I have a pause button, which is not kind of near the end of what you were saying. And thank God I do. I had to find it, because this is where we are now, is when we recognize how easily we can be triggered and how quickly we could say something. The people who raised me said, once it crosses your lips, that's a problem, because you can never pull the words back in. So your wisdom is to stop yourself before your mouth opens and, sugar, honey, iced tea falls out. And so that made me design a pause button in my will. That,
Sure.
just like here, Tracy would say, try not to step on the Baba, try not to jump in and cut him off, because two people speaking at one time is terrible on Zoom. And I am a person of discipline. I'm a priest initiated twice through weeks of ritual. I was taught how to deal with my own discipline. And so if you offer that to me, and I think that's what we have to offer our viewers in the Lighthouse Summit, because we're no longer here just to chit chat. So I thank you again for your time this morning, for your time and your wisdom and your insight to give us a lot to navigate in those questions. Where did we lose our trust? Do we have any self-reflection? And where is our pause button? Do we know it? Can we press it and move to choosing our finest words, or move to silence if silence is the answer? I love you so much. I hope you come back with us on the weekend so that we can just pick your wisdom a little bit more.
Well, the older I get, the more I realize I don't know anything about nothing.
It's so true. A wise teacher of mine told me that. And at the time she told it to me, I kind of believed her, because I believe most things that she told me. But she told me exactly that. The older you get, the more you will realize the less you know. And it's so true. So we're waving that we're out of time. We want to make it, enough time where people can nibble on it. But I do think it leads us to a greater conversation. So we'll just see where we are by the solstice. And I feel better because you're in the world going toward this weekend. I just do. I have some where the pins rise up, where those pins, they get loose on a ship that's ruddering on crazy waters. That's how I feel going toward Tulsa. I'm just convinced.
Just remember that the train runs both ways on that track.
Yeah.
I feel the same about you, dear.
So good to have met you, Baba. So good. Baba Wolfie from the Green Song community. Thank you.
Peace be with you.
Love.